participants, 23 participants as people start signing in. So what I'll do now is go ahead and get started. We kind of tagged this for about 90 minutes. This would be like in the spring if we did club leader training, or we were talking about how to do the foundation things and what you can teach in 90 minutes. So there's a lot about reports, how to find the reports online, and then how to find some other things, that the resources and tools to do at club level. So some of you may say, well, I've already done that before, been there, done that, and you leave, and some may come and come back. So we're looking forward to that. But we got an expert from afar to come and do our training this evening. And so it's Rich Kaye. And I'll introduce Rich with about 2 minutes worth. Rich is over in the Central Texas district. We call ours 5840 is South Central Texas, and Austin and Temple and Fort Hood, Killeen, Harker Heights, all that is Central Texas. And so he's been home there for quite a while. He's started out in the club, did all the club jobs, and then at the district level and was a district government classmate of mine in 2013-14. But what he loves is the foundation. So he's gone through the district foundation stuff for 3 years. And their district has often been the top 10 in per capita giving in the world, in the United States, among other places, and leaders. And so he knows how to do that, and they have that culture. His Rotary kind of background also includes, as he moved on up from the district after 3 years of that, he got promoted to be the our area Rotary Foundation assistant coordinator. So that's like he's got 4 districts he works with, including ours. He's been a big help for us. And then next year, after 3 years of doing that, he moves up to be the region Rotary Foundation chair. And so that's like he works with Susie Howe, our director for our Region 36. And so that's our zone plus another zone. And so he'll be engaged doing that, continuing the foundation thing. So fundraising is a big part of what he does. And as a leader and a role model associated with that, he's gone through the Bequest Society and the major donor levels, and he's an Arch Clump Society member. A wealth of knowledge, a real person. And so now I give you my friend, Rich Kaye. Rich?
Thank you, Jerry. Let me share my screen here.
Yeah, if the rest of you go on mute, that'll help.
We'll get to that. Okay. So, first thing we do, a little etiquette. Bobby, you'll recognize this. I stole it from the zone. I think it's a great slide. Please turn, if you don't have a camera, and I understand Al's camera challenged, but we tell everybody to turn on a camera so we can see your face. It's not quite like looking into your eyes in a room to see if you're following, but it's close. And Jerry, you know, we never did quite make the top 10. 2 years ago, we were 11 in the world. Last year, we were 12 in the world. And at the moment, we're 25th. But yeah, we've never made the top 10, but we'll keep trying. I want to thank you for inviting me. And for the next 90 minutes or so, I want to focus on how we as Rotarians can increase humanitarian service by supporting our foundation. You know, as I'm sure you realize, the Rotary Foundation is the centerpiece of Rotary. It's the glue that binds our 1.2 million members together in meaningful humanitarian service. And it's leading the charge to end polio in our time. You know, as Rotarians, we collectively see a world where people unite and take action to create lasting change. Change across the globe, change in our communities, and most importantly, perhaps, change in ourselves. You know, over the last 103 years, your foundation has now spent in excess of $4 billion on life-changing, sustainable humanitarian projects, which address Rotary's 7 areas of focus and its 2 causes. So as we start into this presentation, what I'd like you to do is raise your hand if you wanna ask a question. or unmute yourself. I want to be as interactive in this as we can be, because some of this you may understand cold, some of it you may not. We're going to do a little bit on the Rotary funds, so you can see what each of those 4 funds do. We're going to talk about what counts for what. Recognition, banners, points, ways to give, including the new raise for Rotary, foundation reports, a rather lengthy section on what you can do to help the foundation in your district. Then I want to give you a grants update because some of this is going to link, as Jerry was talking about, raising money for the annual fund through your raffle. There is a primacy now on annual fund giving because, as you know, points are no longer matched in global grants. So here we go. Oops. Okay. When people who are new to Rotary, or perhaps even longer in Rotary, but not really familiar with our foundation, they kind of think of the Rotary Foundation like the American Red Cross or the Christian Children's Fund. One big bank account, you send money into an address, it goes into this big bank account, and it just kind of, people just dip into it to take things out for what they're doing. That's not how the Rotary Foundation functions. So if you looked at the annual report from the Rotary Foundation, you'll see that they talk about each one of these funds in detail. And we're not going to talk too much about the World Fund tonight, but I do want to talk about the other 4 because they're the ones that you primarily give to when you sign on to the Rotary website and you hit the donate button, you get the opportunity to donate to the annual fund and polio and the endowment fund and disaster. So I want to talk a little bit about those tonight. But before we get there, I mean, what do you tell people when they ask you, why should I donate to the Rotary Foundation? Other than the good stuff it does. Do you know much about how your foundation is organized and why people think it's a good deal? Number one, the Rotary Foundation is an organization you can trust. I want you to notice that 90%. If you were to go to Charity Navigator, you'll find that the middle 70s is a good number for most of the high performing charities. The Rotary Foundation dedicates 90% of its total spending to programs and operations. And those are operations directly related to the grants. That's the regional grant officers who sit there and read your grants and give you feedback. It's the accounts receivable people who take the money in, process it, and then disperse the checks. And that far exceeds the standard set by most charities. And I want to show you a little bit where the money goes. Polio and global grants are by far the biggest consumers of our money, as I hope you would think they should be. Polio being Rotary's signature program, and global grants being our outreach to the world. District grants, then operations. The other grants are the Disaster Response Fund and the Peace Centers. I had the opportunity actually in 2016 to be in San Francisco when the Association of Fundraising Professionals awarded Rotary with the Outstanding Foundation in the World award for that year. And AFP is the organization where professional fundraisers in all organizations are a member. So I'm an engineer by trade, so I'm a member of the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, and this is where fundraising professionals go. Charity Navigator, who I think everybody kind of has heard of by now. 4 stars is the highest they give. We've been there now for 10 years. and less than 1% of the charities in the country can claim to have had a perfect score. I mean, this is a truly amazing rating. Rotary worked very hard to get to it. We had some transparency issues for a while. We weren't publishing 990s, some other things. Rotary took this to heart and said, we can do this. And now for 10 years, we're one of their #1 charities. All right, annual fund. The annual fund supports the day-to-day programs of the Rotary Foundation. When you give money to it, it's unrestricted. You can't give money to the annual fund and say, well, I want this to be district fund money, or I want this to be polio money, or I want this to be global grant money. It's unrestricted. Think of it as your checking account. And just like your checking account, when the money's gone, you stop writing checks. Contributions to the annual fund are the primary source of most of our programs. So we're going to, later on, when we get to the grant section, we're going to talk about how the annual fund is morphing in importance with global grants. When you donate to the annual fund, you can donate to SHARE. All capital letters is not an acronym. Interesting. And then half of that money comes back to your district and your clubs in 3 years for local site-based decision making. And Jerry, I don't know this for a fact, but I'm sure your district takes just about 50% of its available money in a district grant every year. Right. Most districts do. So they can give back to the clubs who helped raise the money 3 years before. Or you can give to areas of focus and say, I want all of my annual fund money to be used for water and sanitation, for disease prevention and treatment, for basic education and literacy, supporting the environment now. I want it to be used for any of those 7 areas of focus. And it's exactly as you would think, district share in the decision making. So the money that we are spending right now was raised in 17-18, and the money that we'll be spending in the new year was raised in 18-19. So you pretty much, at the end of 18-19, could have figured out how much money you were going to get next year. I mean, there's a little windage for endowment fund earnings, but not much. The endowment fund is still in its infancy when it comes to giving money back to districts. But my district regularly looks at that and starts to plan 3 years in advance for how they're going to use it. And I would suggest that it's something you might want to think about in 5840 if you're not doing that, because it gives your district leadership chain an opportunity to talk among themselves about continuity. So in 17 and 18, we knew what we were doing this year. And as soon as we elected a governor in 18-19 for 2021, she began to talk to the current leadership chain about how her year could be seamless with the year before. The endowment fund is what provides support for tomorrow. And what I like to say is, what is your legacy? What are you going to leave behind? What can you do that will continue to do good in the world for as long as humans inhabit the planet? And to me, that's our endowment fund. Jerry mentioned that, Diana and I were lucky enough to be able to become Arts Club Society members. And for all the people in my district who have known me for years as being Mr. Annual Fund, we gave all of our money to the endowment fund because of that, because that principle will never be spent. That $250,000 will continue to earn money year after year. and provide, sustaining projects into the future. And we could go on and on and on with the endowment fund forever. But you could literally give to the World Fund, the Annual Fund, Peace Centers, polio, 7 areas of focus. In my case, I split my money in half. Half the money is going to go to global grant scholarships in District 5870, and the other half is going to go to global grant humanitarian projects. But you have the opportunity to designate that. We're going to talk a little bit later about things like benefactors, but this is a really easy way for you to get Rotarians in your club and district to support the endowment fund. They can put as little as $1,000 in their will or estate plan and designate it for the endowment fund. By doing so, they become a benefactor, but more so, that's their legacy. At some point in the future, hopefully longer than shorter, that $1,000 or whatever it was will start providing earnings to allow people to do projects around the world. So the key on the endowment fund is, what is your legacy? Rotary's signature program, polio, absolutely restricted giving. All of the money that you give to polio goes to support the global polio eradication initiative in both immunization and surveillance. And Rotary was a founding partner of the Global Eradication Initiative, along with some pretty heavy hitters, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, the United Nations Children's Emergency Fund, the World Health Organization, and most recently, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation from Washington. And I'm truly happy to be able to tell people that 2.5 billion children have been immunized because of Rotary's efforts. But that's a huge number. In 1985, when Carlos Canseco started us down this road, nobody thought Rotary had a chance to eradicate polio. In fact, nobody came along with us because they thought we were on a fool's errand. And slowly over the next 10 years, between 1985 and 1995, Rotary began to make a difference. And in the countries where they were able to immunize children, the polio rate started to plummet. And so at about 1995, the Global Polio Eradication Initiative was formed, and the rest is history. We're just about at the end of this road. We have 2 endemic countries left, Pakistan and Afghanistan. And unfortunately, because of conflict in that area, because the Pakistani government really doesn't control the Northwest tribal areas, we still have a little bit more to go. But we'll get there. I had the opportunity to attend a webinar the other day with John Hugo and the executive director of UNICEF, and they are extremely hopeful that within the next 5 years we are going to be able to have 0 cases in Central Asia, which will truly be outstanding. Rotary's newest fund is the Disaster Response Fund. And if you want something to blame for the fact that the World Fund runs out of global grant matching funds now, this is what you blame. I'm being a little facetious. This has been a smashing success. It started in 2019 in the spring, started a little slowly, and then COVID-19 came along. And there were 219 districts in the world who applied for a disaster response fund grant to help respond to COVID-19. That fund clearly had not built up enough money to do that yet. And our trustees, rising to the occasion, transferred funds from the World Fund to the Disaster Response Fund, so Rotarians could indeed make that difference around the world. While I'm disappointed we no longer match cash, while I'm disappointed we run out of money, I'm not disappointed in what the Rotary Foundation did with that money, because I think it made a huge difference and positioned Rotary as a major player on the world stage. Now, this chart doesn't exist anywhere in Rotary. I mean, it's been built over the years.
Before you go on, so going back to your former slide, when you talk about the disaster relief.
Back the previous slide.
Sorry.
There we go.
And well, yeah, but regarding that, so you talk about so much about COVID, but we have had all these natural disasters in the US and other places around the world. Have there been enough funds to like help New Orleans? New Orleans is getting hit for the third time right now. All the fires, all these different things even happening just in the United States. How has this fund been able to support that?
If we had a little parking lot slide here, I'd ask you to put that on the parking lot, because when we get to the section about grants, we're going to talk exactly about that. I don't want to steal all that thunder now without the slides, but if you allow me, we'll get to that when we do the grant update. So I would tell you, if you sat 99 Rotarians out of 100 down in a room and said, I'm going to give you a blank chart and I want you to put in X's, where there's a junction, where the annual fund share accounts for every Rotarian, put the X's in the boxes that you think they're in. Most of those Rotarians would not be able to do that. So when you're talking to, because, Rotarians are not competitive, right? Rotarians aren't competitive much. I want to be a member of the Paul Harris Society. What can I give to become a member of the Paul Harris Society? I want to be a sustaining member. What do I have to do? What's this E-rate thing? And so we put this slide together to show Rotarians that the primary source of funding for the things that they most know about their foundation, district grants, global grants, global grant scholarships, vocational training teams, are all funded by this one X over here in the corner. Money that goes to any of the rest of this counts for all of this, but not DDF. So when we talk to Rotarians in our district, we want them to be educated. I mean, I will never tell a Rotarian that I'd prefer that you donate to the annual fund rather than polio. Polio, the endowment fund, the disaster response fund are hugely important, and donations to them are appreciated. But we'll have clubs who say, well, how come we don't get more money in our district grant? The other clubs get more money. Well, it's where you chose to donate your money 3 years ago. If you donated your money that created DDF, you get that back. If you chose to give your money to the endowment funds, polio, which is fine, but you should not expect 3 years later to get DDF back. And so we use this slide to talk to Rotarians, to inform them. We want them to be educated, so when they go to make a contribution to the Rotary Foundation, they do so fully understanding, if I do this, this, and this happens, or this, and this does not happen. We want them, okay, all right. Yeah, Jerry, this is what I think you're going to talk about next Thursday. You know, why, why it's important to give. You know, we promote peace, and the peace centers are just an absolutely amazing, probably unique aspect in the world. I'm not sure there's another organization that runs a series of centers totally dedicated to training people in peace and conflict resolution. You know, we support education in so many ways. I was reading a district grant this afternoon, a global grant this afternoon from somebody who wants to start a STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math program in Bangalore, India. You know, so we've gone beyond, basic education and literature to advanced education in some of these countries. You know, we fight disease, and polio is not the only thing we do. Mike McGovern, who is Rotary's Polio Plus campaign chair, would tell you if he were here that we have been hugely helpful in the fight against Ebola in Africa and now against COVID-19. The infrastructure that's been created to provide surveillance and laboratory work, and the underpinning of polio has been hugely effective in supporting other causes around the world. We provide clean water, sanitation, and hygiene. And I will admit that there was a time that I didn't really understand the full dimension of that. And then I went to Atlanta, Georgia, and I had an opportunity to stop in at the Carter Center. So regardless of what you think of Jimmy Carter as president of the United States, his work post-presidency has truly been inspirational. And there's an entire wing of the Carter Center dedicated to waterborne diseases. And if you can walk through that wing and not come out motivated, you need to check your pulse. So what I've learned is that clean water, sanitation, and hygiene actually underpins the rest of them. If you don't have that, it creates the condition that the others fail at. You know, we save mothers and children. We do lots and lots of work teaching indigent parents how to care for their child and providing them the wherewithal to do so in a safe, clean environment. We grow local economies. We support the environment. And you'll notice that I've added, normally that's where we end these slides. So Rotary now is talking about 7 areas of focus and 2 causes. So the first of these 5 and these 2 are the areas of focus. And Rotary's 2 causes, and you'll start to see that more and more in literature. 7 areas of focus and 2 causes. And those causes are the eradication of polio and responding to disaster. And Carrie, we will get back, I promise. It's on the parking lot. We will get back. I want to talk a little bit about recognition banners and points.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, it's Carrie, always asking questions. And
I want this to be interactive.
You said you wanted it interactive. So going back to the now 7 areas of focus, environment is new, and that was announced in June. And I am so excited by that. I have been going online to donate to the environment since June. I just went online to see if it's there. When can we donate to the environment? Do you have that answer?
Good question. More to the point, when will we have a written set of rules as to what the environment means?
Well, because I will say that the news has been that grants will be available next fall, 2021, but nobody,
Starting
but
1
how
July.
can anybody donate to it? And so it seems like they already have some of that in place if they're saying grants will be given in 2021, but we can't donate to it.
I think you can donate to it, but I think you can't do it online yet.
Okay.
I think if you send that in on a contribution form, I think it's a Form 94, doing
Okay.
this from memory. If you use that form, I think you can indicate you want the money to go supporting the environment.
Okay. Sherry just sent a note to everybody saying that the new area of focus begins on July 1st, 2021. But I've also seen that grants will be given in 2021. So maybe they're pulling from another area.
You can submit applications as soon as the statement of what supporting the environment is going to mean. Like, if you look on any of the other 6, you can do this, this, and this under water and sanitation, but you can't do this, this, and this. And this is what it means if you want to have a scholarship.
Still figuring that out.
So that has to be published, and they're still working on that.
Okay.
As soon as that comes out, you could start developing a global grant application to support the environment somewhere in the world. They will not start to fund them, however, until 1 July 2021. So the first time that you can send them in, and they're going to sit there to 1 July, and on 1 July they're going to start working them. So that's kind of where you hear the fall, because they're going to start in the middle of the summer processing those applications. But
okay, got it. Thanks,
right
Rich.
now,
I appreciate that.
there's no way to submit one because we don't know what the rules are.
Well, I'm just talking about donating, not submitting a grant, but donating money. So
I think I'll mute myself. I think you can if you mail it in. I just don't think there's a way to do it online yet. They are struggling. I mean, you probably noticed that ever since they changed the website, they've been having recurring problems. It's a little unstable at times. They're struggling right now to fix all of that, and they'll eventually get around to adding another box on the donate screen. They have not done that yet. When we get to raise for Rotary, I'm expecting somebody to ask me why you can't donate to all the funds of that either. And we'll get to that. But all right. So the first thing I want to talk about is E-rate. Sherry, you'll probably appreciate this. I'm a small ball guy. If you listen to the literature and read the literature coming out of Rotary, we want you to push the Paul Harris Society, and we want major donors. I'm a small ball guy. I want every member of my district to give a minimum of $25 a year to the Rotary Foundation. So we don't get a lot of Paul Harris Society members in 5870. We probably have less than any district in Texas. And how we've been able to be the 11th and 12th highest per capita district in the world is by getting 80 to 90% of the Rotarians in our district to support the foundation every year. And that's an incredibly high number. If you look at Rotary around the world, embarrassingly, the vast majority of Rotarians do not support the Rotary Foundation every year. So the first thing I would, when we get to the things you can do, you're going to see this theme again. But every Rotarian should be encouraged to do $25 a year. You've seen the, what is $25, a year. $25 a year, somewhere in the range of 12 cents a day. And who can't do 12 cents a day? I mean, I have been known to go to clubs to talk to them about our foundation, carrying a Starbucks venti vanilla latte cup and putting it, on the podium. And somebody will invariably ask, what's that cup? I said, that's the cup that if I didn't buy it, I'd be able to do E-Ray every year. And it kind of gets that point across, is that everybody has the wherewithal to do 25. It's the willingness to do it. And that's, I think, it's a cultural issue that you need to work on. I'd also, every once in a while, I wonder at some of the decision making in Evanston. We used to talk a lot about being a sustaining member, giving $100 a year. We used to, clubs had banners that said we're a 100% sustaining member club. We don't have banners for that anymore. We don't push that. But again, I'd argue that if you could get the 2,300, 2,400 members of your district, each giving $100, I mean, that's an incredible foundation to build on when you start going out to raise annual fund money over the year. And again, that's, $2 a week, $1.92 a week. It's not a lot of money. And Jerry, do you have a feel for how many sustaining members percentage-wise you have in 5840?
Every Rotarian every year is like you said, it's about 60%, 55%. Sustaining members is probably fewer. So this year, our big focus is every Rotarian every year. We're trying to market that
Right.
using the PI guys and other people as well. So
we're going to talk a little bit in a minute about banners, and when we do, I want to connect these dots, because I think banners can help you get there. So you ought to kind of internalize some of these things when people ask you, so $100, what can $100 do? I mean, if I give you $100, it's kind of like a drop in a bucket. Yeah. But it can provide 3 cataract surgeries in India.
Rich?
Can plant 100 trees. Yeah, I mean, you get the idea. So what can my $100 do? If I give you $100, it'll get consumed in a wink. Yeah, but this is what it can do.
Rich, this is Charlie Wasser. I'm Polio Plus Chair for the district.
Hi, Charlie.
Hi there. And obviously I've got this incredible passion for polio, and I like to see people donate at the tone of, say, $25 each. We just started a program where we're selling Polio Plus themed Christmas cards for $10 each. The person buys 3, that's $25 to $30, but they don't get into the every Rotarian every year classification. Do you know what the rationale is for that?
Yeah, I do. Back to that chart that had all the X's in it. The only thing that fuels the day-to-day programs of Rotary is the annual fund. And while giving to polio is incredibly important and appreciated, it's a restricted use fund. 100% of the money that you give to polio goes only to immunizations and surveillance. And Rotary created a series of mechanisms, E-Ray being one, sustaining member being one, that kind of incentivize people to consider giving to the annual fund, because 2 things. One, that's how we pay for the overhead of the foundation. Why 3 years? Why do you give the money this year and 3 years later it comes back? Because in that interim, the money is invested, and the earnings from those investments are what actually pays for the overhead of the foundation. And if no money goes into the annual fund, that kind of upsets the apple cart. So they incentivized Rotarians long ago to start giving to the annual fund. And I think I've had this conversation with Chuck Mason, but I think you're going to see more of that. I think with the change in the grant model, you're going to see a steadily increasing pressure to have Rotarians give to the annual fund, and the key for people like you and me out here in the trenches working in the districts is to try to keep a balance, to not chip that scale so far into the annual fund category that we start losing money for polio. But the End Polio Now coordinators are collectively worried about that. They're worried about this push to raise money for the annual fund so we can do humanitarian grants, that there's only so much pie in that pie. And when that annual fund slice gets bigger, something's going to get smaller. And the polio people are worried about it being polio. So I take your point, Charlie. I do. I understand where you're coming from. Everybody knows who this guy is. Jerry, how many 100% Paul Harris Fellow clubs do you have?
I think 14 is the last time I looked.
Okay.
Which is pretty good.
So what I would suggest that, again, I'm a small ball kind of guy, so I was after 25 bucks, $100. I work very hard in districts to get them to talk about getting everybody in their club to be a Paul Harris Fellow, by running a contest, by publicizing clubs that do, by giving them preferential treatment at our foundation gala. You get better seating than clubs that aren't. But if that kind of confluence of working E-rate, working sustaining member, working 100% Paul Harris Fellow, I don't, like I said, I don't get many $10,000 gifts, year to year, but we get lots of these. Because if your district is like mine, we do a bang up job recruiting new Rotarians, and we don't do such a good job retaining old Rotarians. So we're getting 400 to 450 new Rotarians every year. So there is a never-ending fertile ground for this kind of action, to focus on becoming a 100% Paul Harris club, to earn the banner. And when we get to banners in a minute, I want to show you some other little unique things that you might want to consider. Paul Harris Society. Little pricier, you got to give $1,000, and this is where polio counts. They didn't in this one, Charlie, do it only for the annual fund. So you can, if you give $1,000 a year to polio, you can be in the Paul Harris Society. And it recognizes those Rotarians that perhaps have a little bit more ability to give a substantial gift every year, rather than that $2,500 that we were talking about earlier. Yeah. Interestingly enough, if you look at all the money that comes into the Rotary Foundation for the annual fund, 18% of that comes from Paul Harris Society members, and there only are 22,000 of them worldwide. Think about that. We raise $120, $121 million a year for the annual fund. 18% of that comes from the Paul Harris Society members. So that's 22,000 people. So 1.2 million. I mean, we're still at 1.2 million, even if you take the 22,000 out when you round up. So you can see how many people are not giving to the Rotary Foundation. All right, and so this is, Jerry, this is where I would give you a pitch on how you raise money for the annual fund, in my world. We celebrate in 5870 earning banners. We make a big deal of it. The governor and the foundation chair go around and personally present them to all the clubs. We encourage them to display their banners. In fact, one of the closest Rotary clubs to your district is the Rotary Club of Shiner. Shiner has 22 years of perfect banners, and they're proud of it. They have an entire wall covered with these things, and they'll call in to us and say, how much more do we need to give to earn the banner? They're kind of nice looking banners. It's one of the things I think the foundation does well. And it's another one of these things where you can give $25 to the annual fund or the disaster response fund. The disaster response fund is a clone of the annual fund with one exception: you don't get share. So anything else that you get for giving to the annual fund, you get for giving to disaster response, except share. "100% foundation giving." Charlie, this banner was created because of the desire to get people to donate to polio. See, the banners that used to exist were E-Ray and Sustaining, both of which were annual fund only. And so 6 years ago, they dropped the Sustaining member banner and added the foundation giving banner. So you can earn, if everyone in the club gives $25 to polio and the club ends up with a per capita of $100, you can earn this banner even if not one penny went to the annual fund.
But everybody has to physically give money. It's not just a per capita.
Correct. Yes. Every single dues paying member in the club has to personally contribute $25 or more.
Yeah, and we usually have 13, 14 of those out of 55 clubs, and it's usually there's one difference. You know, 1 year, one banner for the foundation recognition, 100% would be 14, and the annual fund that every Rotarian every year would be 13, because you know one of those persons that gave to some other part of the fund didn't give to the annual fund,
Right.
and they just missed that category. But
Right, and we do too. We'll have clubs that end up with this banner, the 100% foundation giving banner, and not get the E-Ray banner because members exercised their right to choose and gave the polio, which is fine. You know, personally, I'd like them to give $25 to each one of them, but you know, if they can only do one, you know, it is truly their right to choose which one it is. We just need our members to understand and educate them to understand that, you know, how we get money back to give out in district grants, how we can do local scholarships. That is truly dependent on giving to the annual fund. So the Rotary Club of Northwest Austin is a huge polio contributor. They give somewhere between $15,000 and $20,000 to polio every year, and not so much to the annual fund. But over the last couple of years, they've now sought to find an equilibrium in that club because they've decided they really do like doing global grants. And they were being constrained on the money we would give them in DDF for those global grants because they weren't contributing to the pot that created it. You know, to the governors in your district, current governor, the next governor, the governor after that, the governor you haven't selected yet. This is a change in culture, if you will. None of that's going to happen overnight. What it takes is years of consistency. These are the rules. This is how we do it. And then you let people over time decide if they want to play in that sandbox or not. And so If you, in my district, if you went back to before Jerry and I were governors to 2010, 2009, 2010, we were lucky to do 350,000 to the annual fund in any given year. And in the last 6 years, we haven't been below 500,000. And it was a consistent set of rules applied consistently over time. And so, you know, anybody starting out, another one of your sister district to the east in 5930, you know, we're going to change all this overnight, and we're going to do what you do. And I said, well, I hope you can, but I'm not sure you can change the culture of 2,000 Rotarians, you know, overnight. Some of the older Rotarians are never going to change. You have to work on that 200, 300, 400 new members every year to kind of socialize them to this is how we do business. And this sustaining member thing, yeah, I told you we used to have a banner for sustaining members. Those are people who give $100 or more to the annual fund every year. But here's something you can do. I applaud Jim Henry. He is our immediate past district governor. I wish I had thought of this. I didn't. Jim did. So Jim called Russell Hampton and said, I want to kind of, you know, revitalize this 100% sustaining member thing. And I want to work on getting clubs that want to have sustaining members. So he had them create this banner. And I will tell you, he marketed it all year long. Russell Hampton had provided him a sample that he could carry around. And we had 24 100% sustaining member clubs last year through Jim's effort at marketing this banner. Wow. You know, went from club to club and talked to them and explained what the foundation does and gave them the why talk, and then said, this is your tangible evidence that you supported the why. And it was amazing, Jerry. And I urge you guys to consider. There's nothing magic about what this banner looks like, but the thought of recognizing people publicly for supporting the foundation at $100.
Which our Governor Xavier Tosin's on, and he just in the chat room put that the banners just came in. He has the banners, and
right.
So we'll have to figure out how to distribute them in COVID, and what clubs we can go to and
right.
do that. But for the last 3 months, the clubs have been saying, "When's the banners coming in?" So you're here.
Every once in a while, you kind of wonder why there's air. So it's not like they didn't know there would be a certain number of clubs who were going to get these banners, and you could order them in April so they'd show up in July. They don't order these until the end of July, which is why they don't show up until the end of September to mid-October. And because everybody does what they do. When are we getting our banner? We earned a banner last year. When are we getting our banners? Yeah. 100% Paul Harris Club. This banner is only issued one time. But we really would like clubs to continue this last part, the intent of the club to work to keep their membership at 100%. So past district governor Bruce Golden, I think 16, 17, said, well, why don't we create a patch that they can sew on their banner. This is another Russell Hampton creation. It costs $13 a patch. We bought 30 patches when we started this thing in 16, 17. And Jerry Chapman, who will be next year's DRFC in my district, put in an order today to replenish them because we're out of patches. But it's just another visible way to market, that small ball approach. Because I think every Rotarian can handle the small ball approach. I mean, difficult to walk up to somebody and have a conversation about, why don't you give $10,000 this year? And even if you can get that $10,000 this year, you're probably not going to get it next year and the year after and the year after that. But you can get the smaller contributions on a sustaining basis. You can get people to give 25 a year. You can get people to give $100 a year. You can incentivize people to become a Paul Harris Fellow. I mean, we're going to talk about what do you do with foundation points in a minute, but that is a perfect way to use what is otherwise intrinsically worthless to create money for your annual fund. Okay, and we're here. So just a little bit about points. You know, any contribution that you make to the annual fund, to polio, to the disaster response fund, or to an approved global grant gives the donor credit for that contribution plus foundation recognition points. And they accumulate on a one-for-one basis. So when you give $100, you get 100 points. When you give $500, you get 500 points. And those points work just like money. They can be transferred to other people in amounts of $100 or more. So consider you want people to become Paul Harris Fellows. So, you know, you could say for amounts of 100 to 500, say, if you'll give $100 to $500 toward your Paul Harris Fellowship, we'll match that with a like number of foundation points. And I would dare say, if you count them all up, you probably have somewhere in the range of 2 million to 3 million points in 5840. If you look at each individual member, the points that the clubs have themselves, I mean, it's a huge amount of money. 2 years ago, we were honored to have Barry Rosen show up in Austin. And we took him to breakfast the morning after his talk. And somewhere during breakfast, Barry said, you know, I got a question that maybe you can help me with. I have all of these foundation points. What do I do with them? But I dare say that I think most of your major donors fit in that same category. I have all these points. What do I do? I personally have never had a major donor turn me down when I said, can I have 10,000 of your points? I want to match with them. And I'll guarantee you that your 10,000 points will generate 10,000 real dollars for polio or the annual fund or whatever. I've never had somebody turn me down yet. You can use these points to recognize family members, friends. The Rotary Club of Georgetown puts on an annual dinner and recognizes the city of Georgetown's Volunteer of the Year. And they use 1,000 of these points to give he or she a Paul Harris Fellow as a part of that, using, you know, so there's lots of things that you can do with these points. We'll talk a little bit more about that. I want to talk a little about ways to give, because we heard that earlier from Carrie saying, you know, I went online and I can't donate to supporting the environment yet. How come? So we're going to talk a little bit about Rotary Direct, donating online, this brand new thing called Raise for Rotary. But don't forget, you know, there's a lot of low-tech older people like me, okay? And Amy, you just play along with that. You know, when I have a Rotarian call me and say, well, how do I get my money in? You know, you can, that's why we have foundation chairs and clubs. They can help you. Make that check out to the Rotary Foundation, give it to your foundation chair in the club, or he and she can help. If you have access to a Form 94, which is the new contribution form, You can mail that into the foundation yourself. And we're going to talk a little bit about corporate matching because there's a lot of tribal confusion out there about what this corporate matching is and isn't. So we'll talk a little bit about that. You know, so first of all, Rotary Direct. I am a personal Rotary Direct user. I've been doing it for years. That's how I pay for my Paul Harris Society membership. I do $85 on the 2nd of every month. It's billed to my credit card. And frankly, it's now a rounding error on my credit card bill. I mean, I don't even truly recognize that $85 is on that credit card bill any longer. It is that easy. I mean, it's safe, it's fast. It is vastly improved from the way it used to be. You now, when you log into My Rotary and you go to your profile, you can set up a Rotary Direct payment. You can change the amount of the Rotary Direct payment. I used to do $10 a month and I went to $85 a month. It took me 30 seconds to get into My Rotary and change that amount. They've truly done a good job making this user friendly. Minimum transaction is $10. That's $10 a month, $10 a quarter, $10 a year. But the more of this you get, it sort of puts contributions to the Rotary Foundation on autopilot. This is another great way, Jerry, to up the number of people who are E-Ray in your district. Because if you can get them to sign up for Rotary Direct at $10 a quarter, you know, they end up with $40 a year. That's over $25 and you're there. It's not hard to do at all. Donating online, and I truly want to say to everybody, the only thing you see on the slide is we want to get you signed in. You do not know the incredible pain that you have to go through if you hit the donate button, like the box on the left, and you're not signed in. Rotary, in its wonderful wisdom, sends out the same emails if you were signed in or not signed in. So Rich Kaye can go on the website, not sign in, click donate, give $100. I'll get a nice full color email. Thank you for your $100 donation to the annual fund. It will be the same email that I would get if I was signed in. I'll get my tax receipt. But, you know, Jerry says, but you never showed up because the Charlie Wasser who donated on the left panel is not associated with the Charlie Wasser who's a Rotarian in his club. And that will take about 5 to 6 weeks, depending on the time of the year, to get that fixed. So, you know, this is easy, it's safe, it's secure, but please, please, please sign in first. Cannot overestimate that. You can give to the Rotary Foundation via Facebook. And when this first came out, everybody thought this was such a great idea. I'll create a fundraiser, you know, I'll name the Rotary Foundation as a recipient. You need to understand that, yes, the Rotary Foundation will get your money, but you will receive no credit for that contribution, and neither will your club or district. Facebook bundles all the money it gets for each organization once a month and transfers it to that organization. So if Rich and Charlie and Jerry and Carrie and Amy are all out there running their own fundraisers on Facebook, all the money they raise for the Rotary Foundation gets thrown in one check and sent at the end of the month. So you should understand that dynamic. And that dynamic is what led to Raise for Rotary. Because so many people said, I love the idea of being able to donate to Rotary on social media, but I really would like credit for it. I really, because, you know, my club's banging me to you know, do E-Ray every year, and I donated, but I'm not getting any credit for it. So this is relatively new. Raise for Rotary has probably been rolled out 4.5 months ago. It gives you the opportunity to create a personalized fundraiser for Rotary's causes. And you'll notice on this one, Charlie, it does not support the annual fund. So you cannot raise money for the annual fund through Raise for Rotary. Now, several of us have had a conversation with people in Evanston. If in fact you now say that giving to the annual fund is your most important thing we got to accomplish so we can raise World Fund money for DDF, why can't we give to it? Well, they're still trying to explain that to people, and I'm not sure I buy much of it, but that's okay. But you can do this through Twitter, you can do this through Instagram and Facebook. You will get credit as long as you use the email address that you use to log into My Rotary. So, you know, if you're like Rich Kaye and have 4 email addresses, if you donate through Raise for Rotary, be sure to give them the email address that you use to log into My Rotary, because they will not ask you for your member number. They're matching you based on your email address alone. And if the email address is different, they won't find you, you won't get credit. The good news about this, clubs and districts get credit too. So if you give to polio, not only will Charlie get credit for polio, but his club and his district will get credit for that contribution being made. So I kind of like this. I really wish they had added the annual fund, but not a bad start. And it addresses the 2 smiley faces, which you can't do through the Facebook fundraiser. Corporate matching gifts. Subtle sea change in corporate matching gifts over the last couple of months. I'm sure you know that Rotary tracks your personal giving and not giving that was done for you, because major donor is only personal giving. It won't count any money other people put into your account on your behalf. So in order to make that very clear, they no longer give you credit for the cash. So if you give $500 and your company gives $500 for you, your club and district will get credit for the $500 in cash. You'll receive 500 foundation recognition points instead of the cash. So it's very obvious that you didn't give that extra $500. This is a change. It was not well articulated before they made the change. Several people who were in the process of making corporate gifts were stunned to find out they only got half the credit, if you will, you know, in cash. Because they will give, they claim they will give the tax receipt to the employer and not to the employee. So if, you know, my company, which is Kellogg Brown and Root in Houston, if I gave $1,000 and KBR gave $1,000 to match, KBR gets the tax credit for the 1,000 they give, and I get the 1,000 points. So, you know, it can be a little tricky to navigate, you know, because if you try to track this, it's very hard. You need some help from an annual giving officer in Evanston to help you kind of track some of this. So, you know, I would tell you, feel free to contact, you know, Jerry, contact me. You know, we can maybe help you walk, you know, through this process. So it's break time. If anybody needs one, we can take a couple of minutes, or if you're you're good, we can drive on. What's the census, Jerry?
I think we drive on and people can
Okay,
not hear a clamoring for, hold your hand up if you gotta go.
okay.
So how much longer do you have, Rich? What do you think?
No, we're gonna do a couple of minutes on reports. Then I want to talk about what you can do, and I'm done.
Yeah, let's press on.
Okay. You're recording this, and Jerry, I will provide you these slides so you can distribute them if anybody wants them. Probably the most important thing about Rotary reports is where to find them. So this is a kind of, step-by-step, including how to star the report. So you'll find that on your quick links when you sign into My Rotary. There's a quick link bar on the right, so you don't have to go to manage club and district reports. You won't have to take the long way through. If you'll click that star, it will show up in the quick links. All right. The ones in red are kind of what people want to talk about. How much money do I have? How close am I to my next Paul Harris Fellow, which is a recognition amount? How many foundation points do I have, that I can give them away? Club banner report tracks your participation rate. Jerry, that's what I call, E-rate rates. How many people participated? I try to get my district somewhere up to 80% every year. But it's a way over time to talk to your clubs about upping that. So if you were 32% last year and you're 35% this year and you're 37 or 38% the year after that, you're moving in a positive trajectory. That I think is important. But these three reports, I think that every club foundation chair needs to understand how to use. When you hand this out, Jerry, there's a series of slides in here that we're going to talk about, how to use these reports. And I don't want to waste time to do that tonight, but I want them to have this information so they can lay it out and put it on next to the computer, get on a computer, find a report, and walk their way through some of these. Same thing with district reports. And there are two district reports that I think every club needs to know how to pull. The monthly contribution report, because it's going to tell you where you are with respect to your annual goal, where you are with your per capita year to date. And this is for both annual fund and for polio.
And Rich, earlier you talked about us being competitive. And so you can see where other clubs are. And if you're kind of peers, you're competing with them in a sense, or as close, especially near the end of the year. There's where you find that information.
We have two Rotary clubs that are 107 years old. They were chartered 1 month apart. And they fight like cats and dogs. If one of them gets 2 percentage points ahead of them, the other club is in a panic to catch up. It is kind of interesting to watch that dynamic work. All right. So what I want to do is get to so what you can do to help. Number one, all of us, if you're on this webinar tonight, you're here because you have some passion for our Rotary Foundation, whether it's polio like Charlie or annual fund like Rich. We have that passion for Rotary. So number one, I would ask you to set the example by becoming a sustaining member. And you cannot stand up in front of people in a club and ask them to do something that you have not been willing to do yourself. So the number one thing that you can do to help is set the example by becoming a sustaining member and contribute $100. And Charlie, in your case, you can scratch your annual fund and put polio up there, and that works too. But get everybody into the canoe with you, pulling an oar. I'd ask you to find ways to make foundation giving an integral part of your club's culture. And that may take several years to do. One of the things that my district does is if you want a district grant, you must set an attainable, challenging annual fund goal that represents an increase of giving from the prior year. Well, I can't do that. I'm not sure I can do that. A goal is a goal. They don't shoot you if you don't make it. But if you don't set a goal that's challenging and an increase, then you're not going to get one. You never know what you can find until you get there. Increase your participation rate and work and start with that, Jerry, like you are. Start with trying to become a 100% E-rate club and work up. I mean, if you can get, I mean, we were number 12 in the world last year, and the Rotary Club of Hillsborough, Texas, gave us $25 as a club. So I have an entire Rotary Club that we have made no progress with. But we're still working on them. And the other clubs have been having that cultural change now for a decade, where some of them we don't even need to talk to anymore, Jerry. They just do it on their own. They send them in. They track all this themselves. They know better where they are than I do. I'd ask you to develop personal relationships. I don't personally think you can raise money for the Rotary Foundation standing at your podium. That people don't give money to something based on mass marketing much. You know, develop personal relationships with people in your club. Talk to them, get to know them, and then be patient, because that culture will not change overnight. That's the most frustrating thing. I worked at it for a year. It didn't work. I'm going to go back to the old way. Well, unfortunately, that cultural change doesn't fit nicely into Rotary's changing leadership every 12 months. So this has to be a longer term perspective, I think, if you're going to get this done. Encourage your club to support E-rate. And Jerry, this is the why. Does it make sense to give to the Rotary Foundation? And I think you're exactly right. If you can put somebody up there who can talk about a global grant project, if you can find a global grant scholar to talk about how their life was changed. One of the, if you've never heard Isis Mahia's talk, she is amazing. And she will explain what Rotary's Global Grant Scholarship did for her and changed her life. Make it easy for your members to donate, and there's all sorts of ways. We talked about Rotary Direct and online credit card contributions, but you can't force people to donate, but you can put a voluntary contribution line on their invoice you send them for their dues. Now you would say, well, that would never work. Rotary Club of Waco added, they do invoices twice a year. They added a $50 voluntary contribution line to their invoice 2 years ago, and they have now doubled their contribution, because people go, oh yeah, I can do that, and put in the extra $50. I mean, it's something as simple as that. Consider invoicing your members more frequently. If you do twice a year invoices, one of them will come in July and one of them will probably come in January. And if you're like me, I've just gone through the great Christmas jihad with all the gifts and the relatives and the trips in normal years, COVID-19 notwithstanding. I don't want to, my credit card bill in January is larger than it normally is. And I'm not really into giving $100 in January. So, consider invoicing your members more frequently so you can make smaller asks at greater frequency during the year. And then ask throughout the year. There was one club in 5870 that does something called annual ask. So in October, on one day out of 48 Rotary meetings in a year, they put a piece of paper down in front of them and say, please think about donating. And that's the only time in a year they talk about donations to Rotary. As you might imagine, they don't do very well. Recognize your donors, and I can't stress this too much. People really do like to be thanked. Some of them don't want it publicly, but I basically talk to them as this is not actually only for you. We're trying to inspire others through your example. So would you please consider allowing us to recognize you in public so others may be inspired to do the same thing. Consider holding some annual event that spotlights your significant donors. My district does this thing called a foundation gala every year, and we recognize Arch Clump, Legacy Society, major donors, and Bequest Society donors at that event. And then we publish a little pamphlet that lists every Paul Harris Fellow level that was earned during the year. And it's amazing how many people have actually come and volunteered to become a major donor so they could be recognized because they liked the speaker and they wanted to be able to, you know, have a little private reception with that person. So consider. Use foundation points. Data mine. You know, you'd be amazed at how many people have points that are sitting there that they'll frankly never use. And the other thing you'll find is most of your members don't have a clue what their recognition total is. Now, I have a guy right now, honestly, who is sitting at $9,975. He is $25 away from becoming a major donor and did not have a clue. Because he'd been donating 1,000, 200, 5. He just donated. He had no clue. Data mine. Use those reports that we went through to determine who's close to their next recognition and which clubs are close to recognition. One of the things we have our annual fund chair do is starting in April is get the banner report out and write each of the clubs. Rotary Club of Northwest Waco. Do you realize that you're 3 members away from being 100% E-Ray Club? And here are the 3 members. And then give them the opportunity to go talk to those members and see if they can convince them to support the foundation. Because I think, Jerry, you might be able to double your banners if you had your clubs working those people, because they just don't know. They just, it's like, they get to the 2nd of July and realize they missed it by 1 guy. Because they didn't look. I would tell you to promote the Paul Harris Society, but for $1,000 a year, make that membership meaningful. Recognize them. There is, COVID-19 has actually created the environment where a lot of districts are having virtual socials for their Paul Harris Society members. 1 hour, once a quarter. You bring your own bottle because you're sitting in your den, but you get to meet other members of the society, and that in itself is a good thing. This next one is a little bit controversial. I call them foundation heroes. Other districts have other names for them. But truly, sometimes the official chain of command can be the problem. You can have a club president or a foundation chair in a Rotary Club who is the single point of failure. I don't think this is a good idea, so I'm just not going to talk to anybody about it. And I've had some great success calling cultivating a group of people in clubs who are dedicated to the Rotary Foundation, and if all else fails, they can be counted on to push their leadership into doing the right thing. Because if you're not in that club, your chances of being there more than maybe 2 hours a year are not great. But that person is in that club every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday that the club meets. Develop specific fundraising plans to generate money for polio in the annual fund. Don't simply rely on individual contributions, and that's why, Jerry, I love your raffle, because it gets away from sticking, my hand into somebody's pocket to see what's in their wallet. I think that's a great thing. District 5730 in West Texas does exactly the same thing as you do. And I applaud you for doing that. My district, not so much, and we have to start doing it. We have to see if we can broaden that base. And then, ask clubs, all of them do some kind of fundraiser, or most all of them do some kind of fundraiser throughout the year. Ask them to consider designating a portion of that fundraiser to support a Rotary Foundation program. We've all kind of heard of Pints for Pinot or Pints for Polio. We've all heard of that, kind of fundraiser to simply raise money for polio. But if you're having a crawfish boil, if you're having casino night, ask clubs to consider taking some portion of that proceeds, 5%, 10%, and donating that money to the Rotary Foundation, rather than simply asking members to reach into their wallet all the time. Leverage your points. When we talked about the match pool, we talked about rewarding service. You can reward member recruitment. The member who recruits and brings in the most new members this year will get a Paul Harris Fellow. And in fact, if you're in Rotary in Great Britain and and Ireland, they look down on buying Paul Harris Fellows. That's what they consider we do when we donate $1,000. Most of their Paul Harris Fellows come from rewards for service, reward for recruitment, reward for something. They look to earn their Paul Harris Fellows rather than to buy their Paul Harris Fellows. Schedule speakers that, Jerry, that can help you better understand the value of giving to our foundations. And this COVID-19 period is just, it's been a boon to this kind of thing. I mean, there was a Rotary Club in my district that had Barry Razin all to themselves for an hour. And it's a little club. They had 20 members. So a past RI president sat and talked to 20 members for an hour. I mean, it was magical. And, he chose to talk on polio since it's World Polio Month. But you could hear a pin drop when they were all looking at this guy who they had read about in magazines and and seen in literature, who was taking time out to tell them why it makes sense to give to the Rotary Foundation. All right, finally, y'all know cash doesn't count anymore, and this is kind of where the annual fund comes in. If you don't have DDF, it's going to become increasingly harder to do large foundation programs, because you're going to have to generate a huge amount of cash to do it with Simply Cash. And quite frankly, if you're going to do a grant and it's only cash, and the Rotary Foundation has no skin in the game, why wouldn't you just reach out to your partner and do your grant, do the project between you and that other club, and cut out the middleman? That's what they're really worried about, is cutting out, that middleman. They've reduced the amount of money that the international partner has to put in the game. It used to be 30, now it's 15. Um, about 2 years ago, they started a pilot program for allowing global grants to build things. You know, there was a prohibition against, you know, construction. Well, for simple schools and shelters, they had a pilot to allow that to happen. It didn't turn out the way they wanted to, so that program was terminated at midnight on 30 June. This is where, you know, we talked earlier about adding supporting the environment as the 7th area of focus, and they will start funding global grants on 1 July 2021. This is a huge change, and I don't know if you have any community-based Rotaract clubs in your district, but Rotaract clubs were able to start participating in global grants this past July. And in 2 years, on July 1st, 2022, Rotaract clubs will be able to have their own global grants. Now, this would not work well with college, with university-based Rotaract clubs where, you know, the leadership, you know, turns over, the members turn over constantly because of coming and going from college. It worked really well in community-based clubs. We don't have any in 5870, but I think our governor is out hunting a couple of them right now. So we'll see. Carrie's question earlier that I told her to put it in the parking lot. COVID-19 response will no longer be an activity that's funded by disaster response grants. To her point, there's so many other disasters, floods, hurricanes that are going on that there is no money to address because all the money went to COVID-19. So starting on 1 July, disaster response grants will no longer can no longer be used for COVID-19 response. You will now very shortly be able to designate donations to the disaster response fund. When it started, you give us 25,000, we put it in the bucket. You can't tell us what to use it for. Very shortly, they are going to allow you to designate your contribution to a specific disaster, which I think is great. So if Hurricane, you know, Harvey runs across the shore again and does a tremendous amount of damage in places like Corpus Christi and Beaumont, Texas districts could designate contributions to that fund for that hurricane alone. So it sort of obviates the need to do the DAF like people have been setting up. All right, and you are now being encouraged to do global grants without a World Fund match. But I would tell you, if Rotary has no skin in the game, I'm not sure the global grant mechanism is the best thing for you to do. And there's a couple of funding strategies here that you could do a global grant, and this one has no World Fund match at all. Okay, Jerry, I'm 4 minutes over because you gave me my podium a minute late. I'm 4 minutes over. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them, at least attempt to answer them. And I have one announcement to make at the very end, Jerry, before I give it back to you.
Any questions?
I have a comment, if that's all right.
DG Christy Vanberg has a comment.
Okay.
Yeah, I typed this in the chat. I just encourage you to look at that whole allowing for designation in the disaster designated funds. And the reason for that is if someone, let's say we have something big in Texas and Texans come out wholeheartedly and donate a whole bunch of money, but then in the end, not all that money is needed, you have to go back to those donors, each one of them, and ask them if those funds can be used for something else, or you have to return them to the donors. Once a donor designates where it specifically wants it to go, you may run into problems. And I only know this because I actually worked for the Red Cross for 34 years. So, and they stopped doing that.
Yeah, that's a good point. District 5870 has something called the Kaye Fund. And not this year's hurricanes, but I think a year or two ago, we raised a bunch of money to support